Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 20. And today I'm joined by Charles Byrum, a good buddy of mine. He's going to share his experience of moving from the West Coast to Iowa and how he had to adapt his hunting style to fit his new home state. And he's also got a great Iowa buck story to tell too, so stay tuned. All right, welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 20. And today we are joined by a good friend of mine, Charles Byrum. Charles made a migration from the West Coast, California specifically, to Iowa. He had a few things along the way that kind of prompted that move, and he'll share that part of his story during today's conversation. But I'm really looking forward to sharing Charles' story. I had heard it previously in speaking with him and through a couple different formats. Sometimes life kind of throws you a curveball and then you kind of have to make do with it. And Charles did just that. Made the big move to Iowa, which I have to admit that I'm a little bit envious of in terms of being out there in the land of the giants, being able to hunt as a resident every year. But Charles had to overcome some obstacles, in not just adapting his hunting style of moving from the West Coast to the Midwest, but also just in some physical limitations that he has, which kind of prompted his move. So looking forward to diving into his story. But before we do that, I do want to make one kind of comment that we actually recorded this podcast previously in November. It was just so happened that our schedules linked up or matched up with Charles that we were able to have him on. And I kind of wanted to have a podcast at some point during the off season, if you will, that was recorded during the season to kind of bring back some of that feeling. And I felt like this was a good time to do so, as I've been kind of longing for those days in a tree stand, so much so that I actually took the new tree stand that I had just picked up out into the woods this past weekend and did a climb with my lone wolf stand in sticks, just to kind of make a maiden voyage. And so while I was sitting in the stand, I thought it might be a great time to release this podcast, since this was recorded in November. It's got hunting season kind of fresh all over it. So hoping everyone out there enjoys that and can kind of snap you back just maybe a few months ago and help you relive a couple of those moments. Also, during today's podcast, we're going to be announcing the winner of the Exodus Lift trail camera that we announced the giveaway of in podcast 19. So be sure to stay tuned during the duration of today's podcast, because at some point we will announce that winner. Once we do, I will reach out via social media to get in touch with the folks who have won, and of course get all the shipping information that'll be required to get the Exodus Lift trail camera out to you. Also, we'll be giving away another Exodus Lift trail camera here in the not so distant future, so be sure to stay tuned into all the upcoming podcasts, because we'll be announcing another Exodus trail camera giveaway here in the next couple weeks. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dial Charles in. All right, folks, we are joined by a friend of mine, Charles Byrum, and I'm pronouncing your last name right, Charles?
Yes, you are.
All right, good. I hate whenever I butcher people's last names. I kind of feel like a heel when I do so. But we are joined by a friend of mine, Charles Byrum. He is residing in Iowa currently. Been looking forward to having him on for a while. We've been talking on Facebook and in the social media sphere and so on and so forth, trying to figure out a time to have him come on. This just kind of so happened to work out to be that ideal time. So first and foremost, how are you doing, Charles? How's Iowa treating you? What's going on in the Midwest?
I'm doing great. Just got the warmer weather here this year. Haven't had no snow yet, and it's just been real weird. Unlike the last couple of years that I've been here.
Yeah, I hear you. We've had a little bit of warm weather here on the East Coast. I wouldn't go as far as to say as it was as bad as last year was. Last year was pretty miserable all through November, late October, and really through all the way through the middle of November. But this year it seems to be a little bit better than it has been in years past. So before I
gotta say though, I'm actually a little angry because I did get a new jacket, a new coat to wear, and it's been too warm to wear it. I will sweat in a stand with it. It needs to get colder. Well, Phil, I feel sorry for your jacket loss. It's just in the closet. Whatever, Clint. I gotta be angry about something.
Yeah, I know, right?
All right.
All right. It just doesn't feel right if you don't go throughout a day without something to be a little bit jaded about.
There you go.
But we have a lot of stuff to cover because I think, Charles, I know you and I know each other just a little bit from, kind of creating a relationship online. Sounds like we've met each other on Match.com, but I swear to everyone out there listening, we didn't. We actually met each other through
It's really eHarmony.
Yeah.
Right. I know a little bit about your background and so forth, but before we dive into, your transition from west to east, I know that I'm kind of foreshadowing just a little bit there. Why don't you just give us a little bit of background about yourself, where you're from, what you do for a living and things of that nature.
Alrighty. I was born and raised in San Diego, California. Lived there all my life until about 3 years ago. Working construction mostly. Anytime there was a slow time with the construction, I would maybe take off. I drove a commercial truck for a summer. Worked down on fishing boats for summers down in Mexico. And played around a little bit with helping out training dogs and hunting dogs, and did a little guiding, helping guide for pheasant and stuff like that, but mostly construction.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny. Doing this podcast, I find as we meet new people, I always tend to have something slightly in common with them. So it's interesting that you used to train dogs, because I used to train dogs for a brief period of time in my youth. It was my late teens and early 20s. I worked with a breeder who bred champion bloodline Rottweilers, Fila Brasileiros, and Doberman Pinschers, and started doing obedience training, and actually helped one of the fellows who I worked with, who was kind of teaching me. He trained attack dogs for the Philadelphia Police Force, and before I left that job, I got to help train one attack dog. Of course, I was the one in the dummy suit getting bit. So there's nothing more frightening.
Nice.
There's nothing more frightening than 145 pounds of ticked off Rottweiler screaming up your rear end as you're trying to run away from it. Even if you're in a bite suit, it's still frightening. I promise.
Oh, wow, that would be crazy.
Yeah. I came out with all my fingers. It's not a lot of fun, and I was shortly thereafter was my last day. So
that's it. I'm done.
Yeah. So
I quit. I'm out of here.
Yeah, it was. I didn't turn around and look back when I left. I was like, "Yep, had that experience. I'm good to go." Well, I was also attacked by a dog when I was a kid, legitimately. So people always thought it was odd that I worked with dogs and didn't have some type of healthy fear of them.
Yeah.
But I don't know why I wasn't necessarily scared of them. But that after that bite training session, I had my fill. I think was all I needed. But I know at the top here I had mentioned I knew that Charles and I had met, and we've been having conversations and dialogue for, I don't know, Charles, probably the better part of a year now, if not a year, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And in truth be told, it was when I first started the blog, before there was even a Truth from the Stand podcast. I was of course on social media, and I don't know if you even remember this, but I remember this because it was one of those things where I started the blog, and you were one of the first people to reach out to me on Facebook and actually ask me a question. And it was about a food plot question. I don't know if you remember this or not.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
You were asking me about what you should plant, and you were telling me that you were in Iowa, and asked me what I would, give you as a recommendation. And I had been doing some food plotting on our farm and kind of had a couple thoughts and had obviously done a lot of research. And I just remember I went through and I read a ton of stuff, and I probably wrote you like the longest diatribe known to man about food plots and all the options you would have, because I was like, here's this guy, he asked me my first question, like from my blog as a blogger. And I was like, I have to make sure I give him all the right information. And I went completely over the top and probably wrote you like a dissertation about
you basically dumped it out.
Yeah.
You dumped it all out.
Yeah, but it was interesting because right from that point forward, Charles and I kind of struck up a relationship, online, and really have been going back and forth ever since. And it was awesome that I got to learn a little bit about his story. He was actually on another podcast, which is, because right after that, I think we continued to talk, and you had mentioned you were going to be on a podcast kind of talking about hunting. And I heard a little bit about your story, and it was one of those things where it was really compelling to me, and and the passion that you have for the outdoors and deer hunting specifically, it made me just kind of take pause and just kind of take stock in how fortunate we are to do the things that we do when we go into the outdoors and deer hunt. And I was just all along, I thought, man, whenever there's time and when schedules kind of match up and we can make it happen, I was like, I'd love to have him on just to kind of share that similar story with our audience, because I think it's one of those things where the old adage of like, you have to work for it. And I think, Charles, you embody that. So without continuing to ramble on here, just give us a little bit of background about how you got into hunting and what it was like hunting in California. But before we hear about Charles's background, let's take a quick break for a Whitetail Institute of North America food plot tip of the week. One of the questions I had when I first started planning food plots was just how much land should I devote to food plots? Today, John Cooner of Whitetail Institute of North America shares a general rule of thumb when considering how much land to dedicate to food plots on your property.
Let me just say this to start out with. Even when we do a big property work on a big property and put all our resources to bear, we tell folks we're going to draw up the best plan for you that we can. And I can almost guarantee you that after you see how the deer react to it, you're going to want to tweak it. Most folks, you start with a rule of thumb and then modify it, as you need to. Most folks will start out with, say, 2 to 5% of their property in plots. Some folks go as high as 10%. But 2 to 5%. If you don't have enough land to do that, then just plant what you have.
And that, folks, is a Whitetail Institute food plot tip of the week. If you'd like to learn more about Whitetail Institute and their products, visit them at whitetailinstitute.com. And now back to the show.
Well, I got into hunting at a really young age. I have pictures of my dad taking me out, like way before he ever should have, out duck hunting, little baby in a bassinet out in the duck blind and stuff. So that's, it was my dad basically that got me into hunting. We were mostly waterfowlers when I was young, but I think California, I couldn't go deer hunting until I was 12. And so by the time I was 10, I was just always telling my dad, I want to go deer hunting. He wasn't that into it, but he was more than happy to, he wanted to take his kid out hunting and stuff. So my uncle, my dad's brother, was, when I was younger, was a hunting guide out in Colorado for big game, for deer and elk and stuff. And he actually passed away in an airplane crash while doing that. He was out scouting for deer and elk through the mountains and hit one of those electric wires or telephone wires that go across the canyons out there.
Oh, wow.
But so somehow my dad just figured that I kind of had that blood in me where, like my uncle, I always, was drawn to the big game. I, of course, loved duck hunting and stuff, but as soon as I could talk him into it, he took me out deer hunting, and I think by the second year, I had taken my first deer. My dad went his whole life without ever taking one. But I did pretty good, considering that most people in California have a real low success rate,
right? Especially
in San Diego. There's some good areas of hunting up in Northern California, but in San Diego, it's pretty slim pickings. It's all, you have to be really lucky to get on any private land down there, and most people don't allow hunters to go on their private land down there. And it isn't like here at all, where you can go out and ask a farmer. You can ask 10 farmers and probably get permission on at least 3. Right. You might have to share, the land with other hunters here in Iowa. But so it's kind of tough getting any permission in Southern California. So you basically have to get in early to the state land, and I would hike a good hour and a half, 2 hours in the dark just so I could get as far away from the road as I could, far away from anyone else before I would even start thinking about hunting. And I was pretty successful.
Right. So out there, are you stand hunting, or is it, because when I think of West, and California may be different. I'm not sure. I've never hunted California, but when I think of West, I think of more stock or spot and stock style hunting. Is it that, or
exactly spotted? Exactly. It's almost kind of like the same terrain, really, as if you were going to go to Colorado, just not quite as high up.
Right.
Same like if anyone out there hasn't been hunting in the West, if you watch any of the hunting shows and you see the spot and stock type hunting, that's what it is.
Right. And I'm sure your attire for those types of hunts had to be entirely different too, because I'm sure you're hunting to a degree in some relatively warmer temperatures.
Oh yeah, nothing like here, that's for sure. Yeah, it was just a pair of I always tried to, back then we didn't have the amount of camo that there is now, so I always just try to wear like a gray pair of pants and, usually some sort of military type camouflage, and just try to match the terrain as best you could. And but no heavy jackets or anything. Just always take a lot of water, backpack with you. And that was the main thing that you had to take was binoculars and water and.
Right. So were you
hike
in a good pair of hiking boots?
Yeah, exactly.
Were you bow hunting out there, or were you gun hunting, or is gun hunting not all that popular out there?
It was all through being a teenager. It was all rifle hunting, and I didn't get into bow hunting until I was probably about 20, and I did that for a couple years. And it's just really tough. That was, of course, 20 years ago, so the bows weren't as good then as they are now. And I didn't have no one to go to ask about bows or anything out there. So, of course, being young, I was trying to shoot way too much poundage than I should have been.
Right.
And the bows back then didn't have the let off that they do now. So you pull back a 80-pound bow and you're sitting there holding, 70 pounds of it.
might as well just use a recurve.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. Right. And I missed so many deer, but it did make me a better hunter. I never got one. I shot at a bunch of them, and they would duck out of the way and jump out of the way because they could all see you and know you're there before you ever drew back on them, so they were ready to take off. But it did make me a better hunter. And after a couple of years of that, I went back to the rifle for a little bit, and it got real easy. It seemed too easy, really, once I did that. I'd get close to the deer in no time at all and be tagged out and back to duck hunting.
Right. So let's talk a little about a guy that lives in California moves to Iowa. So some people might say that's crazy. You have that same
or it's a great whitetail move.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a great whitetail move. That's for sure. My wife, her family is from Iowa, so we came back about. The first time I came back here was probably in 2002. I think my daughter was 2 years old, and we came back here and came back during the summer, and it wasn't too hot out or anything, beautiful weather, and so I started falling in love with it then, and so it was always in my back of my mind to, hey, I would like to maybe move out here someday. And then about 5 years, let's see, I think it was 4 years ago, I got operated on my foot. I started getting plantar fasciitis in my foot, probably like maybe 10 years ago. And that really slowed down my deer hunting too, because like I told you, I had to walk so far back to get away from people that it started making it painful. And so I slowed down a lot on the deer hunting and always wanted to get back into it. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. So about 4 years ago, I had an operation done to have that plantar fasciitis tumor or whatever it is removed out of. I had it in both feet, and I had it removed out of my left foot. And long story to make it a little shorter, the operation went bad. Tendon got cut, and made my foot worse. And it basically made me disabled for the rest of my life. Wow. So, shortly after that, my dad passed away, and I just really started looking into, well, I need to go somewhere where I can get away from California and where I can live on a real tight budget, on a disability budget, and where I can where I won't have to travel so far to go hunting. Because being in San Diego, my desert property was 2.5 hours away. Gas over there is like $6, $7, $8 a gallon. I don't know what it is now.
Yeah.
And yeah, crazy. And so we decided I decided I had to bring the wife and kid screaming and drag them back here, but
right.
Talked them into coming back, and basically I can walk out my door and drive for 5 minutes, and I'm hunting deer if I want to,
Right, and I imagine making that move too was made it a little easier in terms of the type of and the style of hunting that you would be doing from the West or California, where you're doing spot and stock for the most part, and as you'd mentioned, doing a lot of hiking to get to where you're going, to now you're really kind of probably walking to a tree and climbing into a tree stand, or walking to a blind and climbing into a blind, and sitting versus walking.
Exactly. That's exactly that part made it nice. It's still hard on me to do that, though. I mean, because I grew up just hiking and doing this stalking and everything, the spot and stalking. And every time I walk to the blind, if it's light out, I can't help myself but stop and laugh and look around and stuff. But
right.
So, and then just getting in there and sitting still, and it's still kind of tough. The blood in me, I guess, just wants to get out and hike around. My foot won't let me, though. So, and here you see so many more deer than you do in California. I mean, I see more deer on my way to the grocery store than I might see in a whole season in California.
Well, perfect case in point was last night. You and I were texting, and you had to run an errand. You had to run an errand real quick, and you're driving down the road, and I get a text from you, just saw a buck chasing a doe, and I was like, I think my response to you was just Iowa.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And your response back was, they're like roaches out here.
Totally. It's crazy. That was a nice buck too.
Was it really?
He was huge. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, he was a big old, looked like a 5x4 of 9-pointer, I think, maybe more. He was nice. They all look so huge out here, though. When I first came here, I couldn't believe it. I was like, holy crap, these things are huge.
Well, yeah.
We got those little desert muleys that are only about soaking wet. The biggest one I think I ever got was maybe 150 pounds.
Right.
And, it's a huge difference. The smallest doe I got here was bigger than that. So.
Right. So not just the difference in spot and stock versus, stand or blind hunting, from your perspective, what were some of the things that you had to get used to as far as your overall approach to hunting, moving from California to Iowa? Of course, the deer are bigger, and I'm sure the rack sizes are larger and so on and so forth. But just like tactically, when you would go into the woods, like how did you have to change how did your mindset have to change to get used to adjusting to the different hunting style?
Well, luckily I have a cousin out here, Eric Gempry, that he kind of took me under his wing and explained a lot of the hunting to me. Because, even though you're sitting over in California, you're watching those hunting shows and you see all this deer urine and calling and all that rattling, and none of that really. I don't know anyone over there that would use any of that. So all of that was, to me, it all looked like a bunch of this advertising, getting people to buy stuff that they don't really need, you know. So he explained, after getting some of that explained more to me, and, getting online, getting on Facebook, talking to people like you, and just trying to soak up as much information as I could, I started learning how to use that. I had no idea what scrapes were or what rubs were. What I thought all a rub was, or a scrape, what I thought like a rub or a scrape was just a deer trying to get the velvet off its antlers during the summer or something, That's the way my thinking was. I didn't know they were marking territories or anything like that. So trying to piece all that together was the biggest challenge for me.
Wow, so that's a pretty big adjustment. I mean, you're not talking just in terms of like your approach to hunting. You're talking even just like in terms of the deer behavior. What you're saying was kind of different out there a little bit. Yeah,
totally. Because, the deer out in California are just like the muleys in Colorado or Utah or Arizona or wherever. They roam around. They're not like the whitetail that has this 1-2 mile radius, They could be one place one day and they could be 4 miles away the next. So,
wow.
That's why I would hike so far back and get back there and just get into more open country and start glassing a mile away and hopefully find a deer and then head towards it. But here, you're not seeing any distance at all, and your best bet is not to hike around. You're just going to move deer. You might get lucky and bump into one, you will bump into them, but that's what's going to happen is you're going to bump into them and you're going to move them off. So your best bet is to, get into a blind or get into your stand and get quiet and wait them out and try to learn. I'm still learning like the calls and rattling stuff. So I don't know if it ever works for me or not.
I was always I was always skeptical of that too, because here in Pennsylvania, even it's like I've had limited success with it here in PA, and I know just from the guys that I hunt with who have been hunting PA a lot longer than I have had limited to no success with calling. Like every now and then you'll get a grunt to work, but rattling around here in Pennsylvania, just with the amount of pressure, it's like I put it this way: the sex ratios just aren't lined up to where rattling is really going to work, because you're going to put it in analogy that maybe humans will better understand. It's like if you're out to a bar or a coffee shop looking to pick up a girlfriend for the evening, and she's you're talking to her and there's another guy there and he's like, hey, this is my girlfriend, and he's like, well, I'll fight you for her. It's like, well, if there's 20 other women that are suitable to your what you're looking for, do you really want to try to take a rear end chapping for that one, or are you just happy to mosey on and find another one?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the same thing. Same way I think. Why is a chick going to stand around for the guys that are sitting there kicking the shit out of each other, or is she going to take off with the guy that's he's like, hey, well, they're fighting, let's go.
Right, yeah, and it's like they can complete their breeding cycle without having to get into a fight, because there's plenty of them to go around here. Now, my experience in Ohio when I was just recently out there was much different than that, where it's like I could definitely tell that the ratios were much more in alignment, because grunt calls were working to the extreme while I was out there, and they were coming in looking for a fight. and I had two of them actually square off like they were going to throw down. One was much younger and smaller, so he of course thought better and took off. But it was just one of those things where it's like when the ratios are right, like they are in Iowa, that you guys have much better ratios out there to where that stuff works a little better. You know what I mean? And it's amazing what it can do whenever you have those things all kind of balanced out. But
yeah, and I still, like I said, for all I know, I'm not doing it right. I just haven't had a lot of success with it. I watch the deer. I see them look towards me, and I've had them like pop up and everything. But it seems like it's mostly younger deer that get interested in it for some reason, like
right,
the 2 and 3 year olds.
Yeah, it's you almost have to at least again, I'll say this: rattlings, I haven't ever had success doing it yet. I'll say yet because it's not like as though I'll stop trying. I really don't do it in PA. I would try it somewhere like Ohio, especially if I was maybe hunting some private ground. But what it seems to me is like you just almost have to find the right deer. You know what I mean? It's like you got to kind of watch him, and you got to see like how he's posturing, his body language. Like, is he telling you that he's just kind of looking to mosey through and not really looking for any of your action, or does he come in, head back, just like he's king of the jungle? That looks like he might be a little bit aggressive or looking for, as we would say whenever I was in my rock and roll band days, you have a couple beverages after a show and maybe you're looking for a little tussle, for a good time, a little extracurricular that day.
Right.
Is he looking for something like that? At least that's what I've heard, is just kind of reading that body language, being able to tell, I've read stuff from guys like Steve Bartilla and stuff like that, who have talked a fair amount about that and reading, deer language, deer body language to kind of tell what's right and what's going to work for them. But so you mentioned a couple things, and I know you just were mentioning calling. And so that leads me to, this next question. So for me, it's like when I'm thinking about you making this move, from California to Iowa, and talking about the things that, that were different just in the deer behavior and the approach to hunting and all of those things, how long would you say it took before you felt comfortable hunting in your new surroundings, or how long was that learning curve for you to kind of feel like, okay, I can go out and hunt in Iowa now and now feel like I know what I'm doing, and feel like I know that I can go out and if I put the pieces together appropriately, I can have success?
Well, this is my 3rd season, and I'm just now starting to feel like that.
Okay.
Like I told you earlier, I basically hunted all my life, so I didn't have no problem with going and hunting. But where I'm starting to feel comfortable, at least in my mind, thinking that I have a little bit of an idea of what's going on in the whitetail world, it's just this season, I think, that everything's really starting to piece together for me. So, and that's spending a lot of hours, too. Like I'm disabled, so, the average guy going hunting, like maybe like yourself, I mean, you have to work, and you get your weekends. Maybe you can slip away after work once or twice a week. I'm out here every day, and if I'm not actually in the stand, let's put it this way: I change my oil every 3 weeks because that's how much I drive, just constantly driving around, blasting, looking. Yeah. So it's just what I do. So
I know that, man, because I see your Facebook feed, and it oftentimes while I'm at work, it makes me jealous. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. I bet. That makes a lot of people do. Now, trust me, people out there, you do not want to become disabled. You do not want to have my sleep pattern.
Right.
That part sucks. I do miss work. I liked working, but I love, obviously, hunting more. But you don't want to become disabled in order to do this.
Right. Good.
I do spend a lot of time out here.
Right. That's a very good point to make. There's other ways to make that happen if that might be more conducive, but. I just,
go work your ass off and then retire early and then do it.
Right. There you go. That's probably a better plan. So with that move, so this year you're finally getting comfortable, and I know that you took a a pretty nice deer this year, and I definitely want to get into that story here as we go. But you're moving out there, and you don't really have, land per se. You know what I mean? So one thing I wanted to ask you is, a guy going to a new area, like, how did you go about getting access to hunting land? And were the locals accommodating to you, being new to the area? Did you meet some resistance, or how did that play out?
Well, when I first got here, I was thinking, some of my wife's family was telling me that I was going to have a hard time being from California. They weren't going to want to let me hunt and stuff. And I actually just used being from California to my advantage. I'd go up there wearing, like a PT fishing shirt and stuff. And plus, I'll admit right from the get-go, right before I start this conversation, it does help getting permission being disabled. So walking up there limping on my cane and get the sympathy card going. So
not that we're advocating anyone trump up a
don't
imaginary...
try it, but
right.
You're right.
Just want to make sure that
so I can't use a can anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Wait a second. Come on, you guys are blowing up my spot.
Yeah, I'm gonna blow up your spot here, man. I'm gonna blow up your spot.
So, anyways, but I would go up there and I would just use, my experience to my advantage. Go and I didn't like to go right up to someone's house and knock on the door. I'd try to catch them out in the field or something like that and go up and talk to them, strike up a conversation, and hopefully get them asking me questions, and that, asking me questions about California, about fishing or whatever. And I say fishing because, they don't have deep sea fishing here, so
right.
That seemed to help a little bit. And then later on, I learned how to. I learned that, if they don't want to let you go deer hunting on their property, well, they might let you go coyote hunting or trapping. I met a friend of mine, Tanner, out here that he's a young guy and he's into trapping, and that kind of seemed to help too. Is if you can get your foot in the door somehow with trapping or coyote hunting, you can, once you get that ice broken and they see that you're not messing with their land and that you're being respectful, then you can later, ask for permission to deer hunt.
Right. That's one of the things.
So that's how I went about it.
Nice. That's one of the things that I've read, consistently, that people have said, if you're looking for, areas to hunt and land to hunt, like, one of the best ways to go about it is really to try to find another avenue in, whether it's like, hey, do you mind if I shed hunt this winter on your property, or, early winter, late winter, early spring, or, do you mind if I do some turkey hunting? Or to your point, what farmer wouldn't want you to come in and maybe do a little bit of predator control for them in the off season? It's a nice way to build a relationship there. What would you say your success rate is for every, 10 landowners you ask for permission? How often are you getting access?
2 to 3, probably, getting 3 out of 10 would be a good success rate.
Nice. And is that all pretty close to?
What? I keep track of everyone that I talk to too, and there was one person that I talked to, or one farmer that I talked to when I very first moved out here. Probably within 2 weeks of me living here, I talked to him, and I didn't get permission from him until this season to hunt the property. I just kept bumping into him, saying hi and stuff, and so don't ever, just because someone tells you no, don't give up on it, but don't pester them either.
Right. So when you get the access to these farms, or these pieces of land, are you then putting out trail cameras and doing all your normal stuff to where you would, folks would typically do? Do you have the ability to do that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
nice.
That's what I do. Is I get trail cameras, I get mineral sites going. I was thinking about putting in food plots. I'm glad I didn't, put in food plots. One thing I'm going to get away from next year is I'm not going to post my deer on public social media. It did mess up my deer. Both times I got deer, it messed up my deer hunts for the next season. I got a deer the first season. I got a buck, I should say. The first season that I was out, that I bow hunted out here, I didn't get one last season, but then I got a buck this season, and both times I got buck and posted it on social media. People find out that a buck is taken, and even though it might not be on the property that I got it on, all of a sudden their family and friends want to hunt that property.
Right. Yeah,
so if they know that I'm hunting that property, even if it isn't the property that I shot it on, they're all of a sudden, right now, 3 of the properties that I have permission on, and no one was hunting them. Now, 3 of them are going to be loaded this gun season with hunters.
Right.
So,
yeah. No, I hear you with that, because I know even when I was out in Ohio on that public land hunt, as soon as I brought that deer back that I caught, everyone wanted to know where I was hunting, and all I would say was by the river.
Yeah.
That was my stock answer. Oh, by the river. Yeah, there's a lot of rivers.
Yeah, exactly.
And that river's really long too. So, good luck.
Well, like I said, that I didn't even tell people what property I got it on, but they're just assuming because they've seen me that I'm on that property, even though a couple of them I wasn't on there. And now, and they have more of a right to it than I do. They've lived here longer, and some of them are family members and stuff. So, there ain't nothing I can say about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't begrudge anyone trying to go find a good place to hunt. It's but I'm of course not going to give up my spot that I've worked for. Whether it's working to get access or putting in time into scouting. So I definitely had it definitely had a lot of folks wanting to know where I was at, and I mean that goes without saying. It's anywhere. Even when I'm back home hunting on our farm, if you have nice deer and these people see some pictures, they immediately want to know where it's at, and then they're interested to come down to hunt with you and so on and so forth. But I think you're smart by not putting anything out on social media. I think it'll probably just save you a lot of headache in the long term. But hey, you can of course text me any of those pictures.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, that's what I'm going to do. I'll text like you guys and stuff. I'll text my friends and stuff, and but people that are like close by.
Right. So let me ask you this question. So you've gone through all this, right? You've done obviously a lot of work, right, to get access and stuff like that, because that stuff's not easy, man. It's a challenge to go out to get people who own a piece of land to give someone that they don't know the ability to come on and carry a weapon and harvest animals off of it, right? So there's a lot of legwork that goes into that. But what do you think the most important thing is that you've learned over the past? What'd you say? You've been there 3 seasons now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think the most important thing, or the 2 or 3 most important things that you've learned over the past 3 seasons hunting in Iowa?
Wow, that's a good one. I think the most important thing is not to kill your hunting area during the hunting season.
Right.
I think talking to you during the summer and stuff, I was trying out something different. I was going in and replenishing my mineral stations every week instead of, I know a lot of people only do it like once a month, check their cameras once a month, stay out of there. And I had no problem with having deer come back all the time during the summer. But come hunting season, that changed real quick. And luckily, I didn't do it to every property. The properties that I did go in and try to spend any amount of time hunting it, the deer catch on. They know it's hunting season. They don't care. From my experience right now, I don't think they care during the summer if you're going out and you're dumping minerals and you're checking cameras. I think there's enough farm work and stuff going on they don't really care about it. Well, there's a lot of farm work going on during hunting season too. The harvest is there. Somehow they know.
Right. I mean, I think it's a combination
if you're hunting.
Right. I think it's just a combination of once you get into that season, I think there's a larger amount of human intrusion, right? Because when you're checking your mineral sites and stuff over the summer, there might be some farm work going on, but by and large, that's heavy equipment that's moving. When you get into that hunting season, you're checking your mineral stations. That's just additional human intrusion, right? That's going through the woods, because even though you're only going in maybe once a week or whatever the case might be, it's like, who knows who else was walking nearby there, or that same deer may have had an encounter on a neighboring property with someone who was hunting,
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. No, I didn't even think of that. That could be very well that, they're getting hit by hunting by other properties around and stuff too. So.
Right.
So I think the number one thing is don't overhunt your areas.
Right.
The number two thing would be, and these are kind of go together, and this goes for any kind of hunting that you do. Just because a place looks like it should be good doesn't mean it is. Hunt where the animals are. Like waterfowling and stuff, I always see people say, "Oh, that looks like a great area." Well, there ain't no ducks there. You ain't going to get nothing. Right. Same with the deer hunting. If there ain't no deer there, it can look beautiful to you. It can look picturesque, but the deer ain't there, and they're not there for a reason. Maybe it's because other hunters think it looks beautiful or something, and they're in there too or whatever.
Right.
You got to go to where the deer are. And then, just like I was telling you, I'd hike back in the mountains for 5 miles before I'd start hunting. I was going to where the deer were, and I think that goes any kind of hunting.
Right. And so what would your number 3 be? Don't share pictures on social media?
Don't share pictures on social media. That's a great one. Maybe that should be number 1.
I know. I was thinking that whenever you started with number 1, I was like, I wonder if he's going to lead off with the social media one we just talked about. But
yeah, I forget about that.
Right. It's okay.
And it's hard too, because everyone wants to brag about, you want to show your pictures. You want to share with people.
Yeah. I know.
It can bite you in the ass.
Yeah, it totally can. And it's funny. I mean, Phil and I talked about this at one point, and not to bring up this topic necessarily again, but we talked about, the Under Armour stuff that happened months ago, and we won't necessarily cover that topic now again, but it was more of just having the conversation about, social media's role in the outdoor industry and whether it's good or bad for it, and just all the different things that spin off of that, from, the type of messaging you're putting out to how people are perceiving that message, and making sure you put on the right filter whenever you put out those messages, so you're not offending those who are not favorable to hunting, and we shouldn't have to do that necessarily, but it's one of those necessary evils if we want to keep people who are at least marginally accepting of hunting in fighting for the good guy side, so to speak. But that might be a topic for a completely different conversation, but you just mentioning social media, I thought I would just make a quick mention of that. But so I think
we could go in for hours on that.
Oh
on
my,
that
I know. I'd have to go down.
Hunters are the worst when it comes to social media. Everyone thinks their way is the right way, and
exactly.
So like I said, we could go on for hours on that one.
I would have to probably go downstairs and get another beer if we were going to do that.
Right.
That's actually a really good point. I mean, I think social media is an ongoing conversation. I mean, yeah, we could definitely have a really in-depth talk in the near future, but I mean, it's evolving and changing so much and so drastically lately that I just feel like that's just something that can perpetuate, and it's just something that's always going to be a point of reference or a topic, for at least the foreseeable future.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good in a way. I mean, I learned a lot. I mean, a lot of my learning curve for out here was through social media, talking to like Flynn and stuff, and that's how I'd learned a lot of what I know now. But but it's also kind of new to a lot of us. The whole social media, it's new to me, anyways. I've only been on there for 3 or 4 years, really, just coming out here, and so learning just how little things can explode on it, and just how people can attack on there at a drop of a hat that, you know, you got to be careful. And
yeah, I think it's just like anything else. I think you have to, you just kind of have to, I have a firm policy of if I wouldn't tell my grandmother what I'm going to post, then I shouldn't post it, you know, or if I even have a thought that it could be misconstrued and I couldn't effectively defend what I was putting out, then I don't put it out. That's kind of my litmus test. The other one is I have an 8-year-old daughter. So it's like, if it's something that I wouldn't put in front of her, then I shouldn't put it out, you know, because a lot of folks, you know, that's their reaction, you know, emotional reaction is almost, you know, similar to how kids react to things, you know, whenever they hear new, bad, or unfavorable news or something they don't agree with. So I kind of use that as my filter. But I know we're getting off topic here because I really want to get to this story here. So I know that we were just talking about the important things that you've learned in social media, and what we're sharing is one of them. But, you know, for being in Iowa for 3 years, you said this year was the first year that you really started to feel comfortable in the deer woods, where you felt like you had a good handle on your approach and your tactics and how to really kind of plan for success, you know, if you will. So with that, it seems like this year you really started kind of putting all the things together, you know, and in 3 years isn't a large amount of time to put things together in an effective way either. And, you know, and I know you took, a pretty nice buck this year. So I wanted to hear about that story and how that all kind of came about. You know, it's give me all the details from, you know, your summer scouting, you know, how you, you know, why or how you decided to select the property that you harvested that buck on, all the way through the release of the arrow.
Well, it started last season. Last season, somehow I ended up getting all my stands and blinds set up for just 2 wind patterns, and I can't remember exactly what they were, but so I could only go in and hunt those blinds and stands on, I think maybe it was on west or southwest winds or something. So this summer I concentrated on trying to get on any property that I have permission on or whatever. I try to set up my situation where I can wake up in the morning or in the afternoon and be able to go somewhere and hunt that day, no matter what the wind was. That was my main goal during the summer.
Right.
Along with, obviously taking data with the trail cameras and putting out tons and tons of minerals. So that's how, like I said, it started last year. Opening day of last season, also on my disability hunt, which is in September, I passed up a nice buck. I figured him to be about 3 years old. And so the reason why I bring that up is that's the same buck I took this year.
Oh, nice.
It was the buck I passed last. And once, there wasn't, I don't have like a great story with him, really. I mean, I picked the right wind and went to the stand I had set up for the wind, and one that I felt was had been getting good action with the trail cameras. And I got up in the stand. Short time later, he came walking in, and I recognized him right away as that buck that I passed up last season. And I sat there and watched him probably, I don't know, for a good 5 minutes. He was just kind of cruising back and forth right below me, maybe 20 yards away, but I was pretty high up in the tree. The tree was probably my stand was probably about, 15 feet off the ground, but it was overlooking a bluff, and he was down the bluff, so it makes you feel like you're about 60 feet up off the ground, really.
Right.
And, I watched him, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to take him or not, if I wanted to hold out, but the more I looked at him, I started thinking, you know what? I think he lost a little bit from last season. And I figured, well, I'm going to go ahead and take him. And I stuck him, and he took off. And I thought I heard him crash about 70 yards away. And then I saw him run kind of out away from the bluffs and towards the corn. And I thought he went into a cornfield. And I was like, all right, so I'm going to sit here and, wait an hour or hour and a half, wait until dark anyways, before I go look for him. And in the meantime, I had a couple of does walk underneath me. And even though I had a doe tag in my pocket, they weren't nothing that I was looking for. I only wanted to shoot a mature one. And I climbed down. Finally, it got dark. I climbed down and went to where, when I stuck him, the arrow stayed in him, and I didn't get a pass through, but it stuck down good. It was perfect where I planned on hitting him. It was perfect placement on my part. Luckily, that's just probably the first time I could say that. But I wish I could say that it was always like that. But no, it was great placement, but it wasn't a pass through. And so then I started trailing him, and I could not find any blood, none at all. And so I figured, well, I'm going to skip, looking around. I'm going to go to where I last saw him. Went over there, no blood. And so I'm going back and forth. And you can start getting that panicking feeling, uh-oh.
That's the worst feeling.
Maybe I did. Maybe I was seeing things. Maybe I didn't hit them, or maybe it wasn't perfect. Going back and forth. And I went away, what I thought was past where I had last saw him. And then I started working my way back towards my tree stand. And still didn't find nothing. Okay, well, I had to start. And the whole time I'm going back and forth. And it's not easy on me doing all this walking, with the cane out in the swampy grass and all this stuff.
Right.
It's kind of tough, but I don't want to bitch too much about that. But anyways, we could have a whole show of me bitching about my foot. But
we'll do that one day. We'll just have
my wife can attest to that.
Right, we'll have a part 1 and part 2. We'll have you on, and then we'll have her talking about dealing with you.
Yeah, exactly. You might have to put 2 shows for her.
Right. Yeah, we'll just give her the microphone, and we won't even show up. We'll just let her go.
Yeah, might be divorced afterwards.
Right.
Anyways, so I started going further than where I thought that I had seen him, and I shined the light and came across, and there he was, just piled up.
Nice.
So, yeah, I mean, luckily he never made his way into the corn, and I hadn't walked far enough to find him, and luckily I found him. Nice. So then I started trying to get him out of there, and I had taken the doe out of the exact same spot the year before, and I was able to do it. I was able to take my time and get her out by myself. Well, with the buck, he was big enough where I couldn't do it. I sat there and sweated for, I don't know how many hours trying to figure out. I had a little sled that I was trying to drag him on and trying to get him to my deer cart, and my truck was only probably maybe 200 yards away.
Right.
But I couldn't get him out of that swamp, and finally I called another cousin of ours and drug his ass out of bed at 11 at night, and luckily, and he came over and bailed me out. And once he got there, I mean, it took us 5 minutes to get him out. But right. I just could not do it by myself. Right. And so by the time we got him out, I was beat. I was done. We got him into my little cage here in my Suburban, and I came home, went to Walmart, grabbed, 5 bags of ice and stuffed it in his cavity. And the next day, took him to, because it was pretty warm out still that time. So I didn't have nowhere to try to butcher him myself. So I took him down south to a butcher that I used. And on the way back, me and my wife stopped where I had taken the deer so I could pick up, because like I was saying before, I was tired and everything. So I left my cart and everything in the brush. I didn't try to pack it in the truck. And went back and got my cart. Went down to where I had found the deer, where the gut pile was, and all that. I never found a blood trail. Never.
Wow.
Even during the daylight. He must have, when I heard him crash, he must have broke the arrow off during that time, and I never did get to see where that was, but he went probably, I don't know, maybe a total of 150 yards or so. It was, like I said, a good shot. He was double lung, but he still ran a long ways. But no blood trail. None.
That's wild, man.
If I didn't find him in a pile, I don't think I would have ever found him.
Yeah, those.
So I really got lucky.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my brief experience, you mentioning that he went pretty far after a double lung. It's like I was talking with my buddy Tate when we were out in Ohio hunting, and I got the buck that I got, and he ended up getting one too. And we were just kind of talking about, we both put really good shots on our deer. Both of them were complete pass-throughs. And I was like, I don't know, man, those Midwest deer are just built tougher or something, man, because that thing ran a lot further than I would ever thought he did with a double lung, full, complete pass-through the way I got him. And my buddy Tate's deer, too, it was the same thing, double lung, total pass-through, and that thing ran.
Yeah, the deer are tough. There's no doubt about it. Even there was a doe that I shot in California with a 270, and I took an inch off of her heart, and she ran 100 yards at least before she piled up.
I stubbed my toe and I pile up on the floor, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, I cry every night about my foot.
Nice. But hey, that's pretty cool, man, that you actually saw that deer the year before and were able to recognize him this year and took a deer that you had some history with. Because that's one thing that I'm looking forward to trying to do, that I wanted to try to do on our farm this year, but just, with the hunt, in Ohio just didn't allow me any time to really get back to the farm. I had some early season. I'm hoping maybe I can get it done here in late season at the farm and go after one of two deer that I have history with, that I have on camera again this year. I've never had that though, but that seems like, how cool is that? I mean, whenever you saw him, were you kind of like, I can't believe I've seen that deer before and I'm going to have an opportunity?
Yeah. It was super cool, really. I mean, and like I said, it took me, I could have taken him a lot quicker. I could have taken him within like 30 seconds of seeing him. And, but I sat there and watched them and stuff, and like I said, I finally decided that, with the amount of minerals and stuff I've been pumping out, and he lost mass, I mean, I figured he'd be perfect management, buck, and I kind of, to be honest, have had buyer's remorse since then. I've seen some incredible bucks, since then, but I mean, I'm thankful that I got them and everything, but you see these big bucks and thinking, why did I take them? But I'm glad I took them. And it is totally, totally cool when it's a deer that you have history with. I passed him up. He was probably about 30 yards away from me on that opening day the year before. And, to get another chance at him this year, it was awesome.
Right, and I'm sure the bucks that you're seeing here in Iowa, even the smaller bucks, I would imagine, are bigger than a lot of the deer that you saw living in California.
Oh, the very first encounter I had one was crazy. I was in a blind, and sitting there, my cousin started texting me. That cousin Eric, he's in the military, so he couldn't come out hunting at the time, and but he was kind of living, hunting through, my eyes or whatever, me being in the field. So he's texting me all the time while I was hunting. And All of a sudden this buck comes walking up, and I'm like, and I couldn't move because the deer was like 10 yards away from me, but I could text my cousin, and I'm like, dude, there's a huge deer right outside the window, and he's all, well, stick him. And he goes, what is he? I'm all, he's a 8-pointer. And he's all, stick him. And I'm like, I can't move. And the deer wandered off, and so I'm texting him, and all of a sudden, a couple minutes later, he's coming back. And I'm like, he's coming back. And he goes, wait, don't. He's all, don't shoot. And I'm like, wait, don't shoot? What are you talking about? He goes, and then he's texting. He's all, are you sure he's that big? You know, if his antlers past his ears? I'm like, well, no, the antlers aren't past his ears, but he's bigger. Biggest deer I ever saw. And he's all, no, he's just a young buck. He's out. He's just messing with you. He's come back and forth probably a bunch of times this morning. And
right.
Sure enough, that deer just kept coming back and come up, and he would sniff the blind and turn his head and like jerk around like he was like a dog trying to play fetch, and it was driving me crazy. That was my first encounter with a buck while I was hunting in Iowa. Biggest deer that I ever had a chance with was playing with me like a dog.
That's pretty awesome, man. I'm looking forward to eventually someday getting out to Iowa. I'm hoping here, not this coming season, but the season after. I'm hoping will be the year that I draw my tag, and I'll definitely have to hit you up for some pointers, for some Iowa pointers, as you're continue to learn the lay of the land out there and how to get after these deer. But I think with that, man, that's I want to be sensitive to your time and don't want to eat up too much of it. I know we took up about an hour of your evening here so far. So I think with that, man, we can go ahead and wrap it up, Charles. But thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing your stories, and I look forward to sharing some texts with you, my friend. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I think at this point we can go ahead and do the big reveal of who the Exodus Lift trail camera winner is for this giveaway. So without further ado, I would do a drum roll if I had a drum, but I don't have one. But the winner of the Exodus trail camera giveaway today is Chris Tashuti. So Chris, congratulations to you for winning the Exodus trail camera. I'll be in touch, of course, through social media, and we'll get all your shipping information and get that shipped out to you as soon as possible. So congratulations, and thanks everyone for sharing the content, liking the and liking the Facebook post and participating. We'll also be giving away another Exodus trail camera here in the not so distant future, so be sure to stay tuned in for an opportunity to win, for a chance to win another Exodus trail camera. Also, of course, we want to thank Charles for joining us today. I loved having the conversation with Charles. Look forward to our discussions here in the upcoming hunting seasons, and just good to have him as a friend. I'd be remiss as well if I didn't mention on Charles's behalf that he wanted to make sure before I kind of signed off that I gave a big thank you to Rick Ritchie for helping him gather his deer after the harvest this year. So there are a few things in life more valuable than a good hunting buddy. It sounds like Rick is a great hunting buddy to Charles. So Rick, thank you on behalf of Charles for helping him dig his deer out this past year. Also, would be a big fail on our part if we didn't give a big shout out and thank you to all of our partners that make this podcast possible. Of course, Exodus Trail Cameras, Whitetail Institute of North America, and Lone Wolf Portable Tree Stands. And of course, want to make sure to thank each and every one of you for tuning in and listening to a couple knuckleheads talk about deer hunting every other week for about roughly an hour, and giving us a part of your day to have that conversation. And finally, if you're enjoying the podcast and the content, please visit us on iTunes and share a 5-star iTunes rating. We'd be very much appreciative of that. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast via iTunes, Stitcher, and you can, of course, catch us on Google Play as well. And until next time, we'll see y'all.